Good morning, afternoon, or good evening, folks. I'm your host and guide, Chris Roberts. I'm going to take you on a tour of the underground to help you prepare for what's really out there. Whether you're on the front lines battling the latest threats or leading the overall defensive strategy within your organization, my focus is to help you uncover the best ways, means, and methods to effectively and efficiently use actual threat intelligence within your company, providing you with more insights and practical ways to identify threats and reduce risks before they become incidents. Ready to dive in? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depends where you're coming in from. Welcome to another Dr. Web. We're going to have some fun this afternoon or this evening, depends where you're in. At the moment, it is coming up on early morning in this neck of the woods. As always, joined by my esteemed co-host, who makes sure that we actually do this in the right order and the right things and the right stuff happens at the right time, and Ilana, who is one of the pretty amazing analysts over at Cybersixgill, who I'm actually looking at one of her reports at the moment. I'm like, okay, I bow down to your knowledge. So I'm going to be having fun picking all of this and having some fun with this. So Danny, as always, absolute freaking pleasure. And thank you for putting all this together. And Ilana, please feel free to take it away. Introduce yourself, say hi to everybody, and we'll go from there.
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. So I'm Ilana. I'm a web intelligence analyst, and I collect intelligence from open sources, but also more in-the-ground sources, closed sources, in order to create valuable reports and bring good insights about the situations, major cyber events, all the related stuff.
So let's dig into that a little bit, if you don't mind. You're digging into the data. Talk to me about that, because I mean, there's a lot of folks who understand some of what goes on, but there's a lot of folks who still are puzzled by how that digging occurs. You know, is it random acts of searching stuff on the internet? Is it knowing where to look for things? Give us some insight on that. I'm kind of intrigued.
Sure. So first, I'm used to look on open sources, which is called Clear Web. So here I can find a lot of information that are available to pretty much everyone, so the public. And when I find an interesting item or something like it's worth finding for more information or to link it to further items, I look on specific dedicated sources, which can be underground forums, underground markets, or underground instant messaging applications to understand what is said about a specific topic, or if I can find similarities or link the dots with further information that can be valuable to understand a whole picture.
Got it. So when you're doing that, you're doing what a lot of us are doing. You're out there looking, searching through news sources, searching through data and going, okay, this is cool, this is interesting. And then going, I can go dig into this in more depth. So we've got a couple of topics we can go through. The current situation, obviously, in Europe is topic of mind, topic of everything else. But one of the reports I'm looking at of yours is an absolutely fantastic one about ransomware. And it's been, let's face it, it's been the topic of the day for a couple of years. And we've seen the ebbs and flows of ransomware across various different markets. When you're looking at that and digging into it deeper, are these just sources that you know, that you found, that just you've got the knowledge because you're in this thing on a daily basis? Is it stuff that you're aware of? How are you gathering those sources?
So I'm gathering these sources by searching ransomware actors' dedicated leak site. So a dedicated leak site is an official dark website that most of the ransomware groups maintain, and they used to leak all their victims' data on these dedicated leak sites in order to collect a ransom demand. So the ransomware gang used to attack a victim to encrypt victims' data and then ask for a ransom in order to retrieve this data. But if the ransom is not paid, or until the ransom is not paid, or until the victim has not initiated negotiations with the threat actor, the latter can actually start to spread all the extracted data from the victim on these dedicated leak sites. So I have a list of some famous dedicated leak sites belonging to some ransomware groups that I know and I've used to monitor them on a regular basis. And sometimes I found very interesting items related to clear news, cyber events that are being publicly reported. I'm used to monitor a very broad range of underground sources and especially dedicated leak sites belonging to ransomware groups. There are some ransomware groups that are, yes, more dedicating more in their leak sites. They also are building comparatives about the encryption tool that they are using in comparison to other threat actors and competitors. And this is actually the way that all traditional ransomware gangs are working. They leak the data on their leak sites, or they leak the data progressively until the victim reach out for a negotiation.
Got it. Now, here's an interesting question for you. Obviously, the ransomware gangs have a core team or core teams of people. Are they using these sites almost as a recruiting tool? Because if I'm a nefarious actor and I decide to go break into, company over here, I want to know that I can maximize my profits. I want to know that I'm going to get the most money for it. Are they using it as a recruiting tool to say, hey, use our system, use our tool because you'll maximize and you'll do this? How are they doing some of that? I'm intrigued on some of that.
There are some ransomware gangs which are advertising their what is called ransomware program or ransomware as a service, and it actually gather affiliates which are willing to work for this specific ransomware gang, and they will have a divided part of the ransoms if they successfully gather payment ransom from victims.
Interesting. Interesting. So you've got your ransomware, you've got your team, now you need your targets. How are they choosing their targets? I mean, how are they going after it? Are they looking at certain sectors, or are they going after anybody that's got exposure on the internet? What are you seeing in this? I'm interested in from a trending standpoint.
So the choice for victims can depend on a lot of things. The ransomware group can have a lot of motivations and motives to choose their victims. So it can be financial motivation, or it can be to follow a political agenda, or it can be also to spread psychological harm and to cause disruptions on specific companies. It can be very different, but the two main motivations that I observed so far is the financial motivation and sometimes combined with a political agenda.
Can you talk a little bit more about the political agenda? Obviously, we all know it's in the news every single day, as it should be. There's a huge war going on in Europe. How much have
Yes.
you seen the tactics change and the boundaries and the alliances change in the ransomware groups? I'm interested in your thoughts, and please feel free to dig into this as much as you would like.
All right. So, yeah, the tendency of ransomware gangs targeting political organizations, governmental entities has boomed since the beginning of the war between Russia and Ukraine in February. I have observed a very increasing trend showing ransomware gangs or hacking groups in general launching attacks on the opposite sides, on the enemy sides. It can be very broad. It doesn't only mean that Russian threat actors are going to target Ukraine and Ukraine are going to target Russian entities, but also the allies of both of the sides will also be part of this cyber warfare.
Got it. So that's interesting. So, I mean, you're watching this and you're seeing this. Is this something, basically from a Cybersixgill stuff that you can then take and say to your clients, hey, look, North America is an ally to the Ukraine. Therefore, ransomware gangs are looking at certain types of industries and certain types of countries. Are you seeing some of that movement?
Yes, of course. I've seen a very increasing trend of threat actors in general launching. It can be ransomware attacks, but it can also be denial of service attacks. It can be the spread of malware or phishing campaigns targeting the US, especially, but also other European countries which are considered as Ukrainian allies and who launched economical sanctions to Russia.
Got it. So, which is where maybe the financial sector, because I was reading one of the reports earlier from the team there, and there was a lot of conversation, not just on manufacturing and the government. Obviously, those are big targets, But to your point, a lot of the financial sector getting hit as well. And we noticed it from the other part of the world that I deal with. We've noticed it in manufacturing and aerospace, huge uptick in the amount of attacks and the amount of social engineering attacks, like a massive uptick in the amount of insects. Is this a similar trend that you're seeing from the reports and from everything?
Yes, exactly. So at the same time, at the beginning of the war between Russia and Ukraine, I have observed that the manufacturing sector was targeted in 10% of all the ransomware attacks because the manufacturing sector is actually a highly attractive target for the ransomware groups because they transform raw materials for a wide range of industries such as transportation, defense, or energy. And these industries are critical for a developed nation, making it targets a very attractive target for these hacking groups in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we talk about a lot. It's, as an adversary and as an attacker, I'm not going to go kick the front door down of the company if I can attack the supply chain. If I can go after the supply chain, your vendors, your partners, and everybody else and affect issues there, or exactly to your point, I can affect the manufacturing of the raw materials that they use to produce the stuff I need. At that point in time, you've crippled me in a completely indirect manner and probably done it more effectively and easier than you really have. So when you're looking at this, are you breaking it down by region? Are you breaking it down by company? I'm intrigued as to how, because I mean, these are some major rabbit holes that you're digging into to understand where the data's coming in. How are you looking at this? Are you regionalizing it? Are you looking at it in vertical markets or just all of the above?
So yes, I'm defining this ransomware attacks target by the regional perspective, geographical area mainly targeted by ransomware groups, and also the industry to understand which industry is the most targeted by ransomware groups. And sometimes it combines both, one specific geographical area, which is always very highly targeted, and as well as the same industry, which is one of the top targets for ransomware gangs.
Got it. And then when we talk about regions, how do you break regions down? I assume like North America, Latin, Middle East, and a few of the other areas. I mean, obviously Asia Pacific and everything else. How much activity are you tracking in each one of these areas?
So I've been tracking a very high activity of the ransomware attacks targeting the North America continent. It was actually the most affected region as the conflict between Russia and Ukraine started. But it was also followed by countries from Western and Southern Europe. As I told before, these countries were considered as allies of Ukraine. So also a potential target for a ransomware attacks or other kind of attacks by a state-sponsored group.
So now you just answered the question I was actually going to ask, which is, to what certainty can you turn and say, hey, look, there are targeted attacks against North America, against allies of Ukraine that are being perpetuated by, former Soviet Union attack groups, Soviet Union sympathetic groups, or is it just you're making the best guess as you can based off of the attack vectors? I'm interested on that one. Part of the logic on this one is in the US, we're very, very quick to blame. We're like, oh, it's a nation state or it's this, or we go blame North Korea or somebody else. And I'm very, very cautious when it comes to that until we can get very, very carefully put on and go, here's the fingerprint that says it was this country.
Yeah, so actually, there is, of course, an increase of ransomware attacks targeting the North American area, but it can be done by several kind of ransomware groups. It is not necessarily Russian hacking groups or Russian ransomware groups. There are also other groups and ransomware gangs which are attracted by the North America continent or just want to disrupt North American companies. But here, since the beginning of the war between Russia and Ukraine, we can assume that much of the ransomware attacks on the North American area and the Western and Southern Europe are also part of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
Got it. It's interesting. I mean, it's rough. And I think this is why I love doing the Dr. Dark Web stuff, because you're sitting here telling us, like, we're not making this up. You're telling us, look, here are the groups, here are the victims, here are the companies, here's what's going on. every single minute of every single day. And yet so many companies aren't paying attention. So many companies are like, well, it's fine. Everything's okay on this one. And I need people to listen to people like you to go, hey, my job is to watch you get attacked. My job is to watch people put the bits of puzzle together to know how to break into you. And then because you're not listening or you're not aware, and watching them take your data, it's frustrating as all heck. I mean, how, from your standpoint, how are you dealing with it? I mean, you're putting out some amazing reports, but how else, when the audience that are listening and people that are helping out there, how else can we help people become more aware? What can we help people think about and what can we help people do?
Yes, so I actually dive into a lot of information coming from threat actors targeting massive lists of companies and targets. It can be a governmental company, organizations, or private companies. And it is, yes, sometimes frustrating to see all this amount of companies or organizations being attacked. And, you want to help in a way. But I think that there are general recommendations that all organizations should apply in order to strengthen their security level. So the first one is to enable multi-factor authentication and access control in order to secure the login portals by another way of authentication and secure their corporate networks. We can also provide a recommendation to create data copies and backup on external servers in a way that if a network is being targeted by a ransomware attack, a ransomware group, the organization will at least have a recovery plan to this attack and will eventually not have to pay a huge ransom payment or lose all their data. So it's important to create backups and copies on external servers, which are isolated from the main business network. We also recommend organizations to keep all the softwares and products up to date because very often I see underground sources that threat actors are looking for vulnerabilities in specific products that the companies and governmental organizations are using. And these vulnerabilities can constitute initial attack vector for a threat actor to penetrate a network and then do all the malicious activities. And of course, it is also very important to remain aware of the new vulnerabilities, the new trends, the new attack vectors that are discussed between the threat actors in the ground communities and patch all the vulnerabilities, patch all the products as soon as a corrective becomes available. And I will finish by saying that one of the most important things that organizations can do actively is to educate their employees and their staff, because sometimes you can have all the technologies, which is very helpful and very efficient, but sometimes the deployment of malicious software can be ransomware, malware, or anything else. It's just one click away, literally. So educating the staff, the employees, the stakeholders, third parties is very, very important in order to train them not to click on all the links they can receive in mail or not to download attachments coming from suspicious emails in order to reduce the attack surface on the organization.
If it was appropriate, I would reach through the damn screen and hug you for that last comment, to be perfectly honest. Having just spent the last couple of days and actually the last afternoon talking to the new team about people, the then process, and then maybe we'll throw technology at it. It's huge. You hit it absolutely perfectly. It's all about the people. I mean, we can put as much tech in this place as humanly possible. We can do all these wonderful things. We can put all the blinky lights in, but unfortunately, sometimes somebody just does something and it's not their fault. We either haven't trained them, haven't educated them, or something has gotten in the way, or pressure's going on and something happens. And this is to one of your other points, which is when it happens, because it's going to happen, is have that incident response plan in place, have the multi-factor in place, have the offline backups in place. ensure you know what's going on, and then have a plan to recover. I mean, this isn't, we're not selling anything new, and we're not talking about anything blindingly unobvious. This is stuff that we've been trying to talk to people for years about. So a couple of other things, if you don't mind. Obviously, your role within Cybersixgill isn't just to dig data. Let's be very, very honest about this. It isn't just to put stuff together and go, hey, this is the data. You're putting some pretty eloquent and amazing reports together, of which for quite some period of time, I've been getting the data things, and I've got one sitting up here at the moment. These are available. These are not hidden behind a paywall or a register wall or anything like that. These are actually out there for people to read should they wish to partake in this. Am I right in that conversation? Am I right in that point?
So the reports are mainly dedicated to our customers, and we are trying, yes, to broaden the audience to these reports.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because I mean, Danny's been talking about putting a bunch of stuff out there as part of the dark web stuff that people have resources, so people can go, hey, love the conversation. Now give me something that I can go take and beat somebody over the head with so that we can do something about it. So yeah, that would be fantastic. I would love to see more and more on this one. I think it's, again, part of the reason for doing the Dark to Dark web series is to bring people on and go, look, this isn't just us talking. This is reality. Welcome to reality. Welcome to the fact the country's being targeted, the organizations are being targeted, the data is being targeted. Actually, here's a question for you, if you don't mind, kind of a squirrel-ish question. What I've seen a couple of times, and I'm interested as to whether it's right or wrong, what I've seen a couple of times is ransomware goes in, takes all the data, tries to sell it back to the company, but also keeps a copy of it to sell it somewhere else later. Are you still seeing that? Or are they being a little bit more honest? In other words, if I buy my data back, that's it. It never goes back on the darker side of the internet. It goes back to me and that's it. What are you seeing on that one? I'm interested.
So this is the big challenge. A lot of companies are wondering if paying a ransom will actually give them back the data and stop all the possible data leak. But it's not always like that. There are some ransomware gangs, very prominent ransomware gangs, that state in their ransom notice that they care about their reputation and they will honor all their promises in terms of data return and stopping leaking their data. But, it's the cyber criminal community and we don't really know what happened. We cannot be sure 100% that the ransomware gang has a word that it will honor at the end.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, honor among thieves to some degree. I'm interested. Any thoughts, any more ideas, any anecdotal stuff that you would like to add? I mean, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I'm absolutely honored, an absolute pleasure to have it, but the floor is open if you would like to add more. And Danny, please feel free to chime in on this as well.
I'll chime in and say this is awesome. I mean, I know Ilana and I were speaking, and I said, well, let's have you on as a regular guest every month because the stuff that she's extracting is just so valuable and has to be shared with the rest of the world. So, Ilana, are you down? Are you ready to be on as a regular guest?
Yes, for sure. With pleasure.
I would love it. It would be an absolute pleasure. Partly, I think, because it's worthwhile watching the trends. Okay, so this goes into a complete squirrel moment. When you think about it, ransomware gangs were, and correct me if I'm wrong, ransomware gangs operated relatively independently. Yes, they had some allegiance to whatever country they were in, but they operated relatively independently. Then when the Ukraine-Russian conflict, there was a huge allegiance. I mean, so many of the gangs went pro-Ukrainian, some of them went pro-Russian, and some of them got beaten up pretty badly because of it. I'm really intrigued when this war is over, as long as we don't go the nuclear option, when this war is over, let's say China and Taiwan get into a fight, or let's say America and Mexico get into a fight, or Canada get into a fight, or England decides to get its territories back and goes charging after India or somewhere. Will we see those same kind of like digital allegiances? Because it's a crazy amount of people. I mean, you look, our territorial forces number in the Ukraine and the US and everything else, tens of hundreds of thousands, maybe into the millions. But you look at the number of digital keyboard warriors that were put to work on day one of that Ukrainian war that just volunteered from all across the globe. That's a huge army that doesn't bear an allegiance to a flag. I'm interested, really interested. Any thoughts you have on that, on where you see that going in the future? Either one of you, I'm really intrigued on this one.
Sure. So yes, definitely cyber weapons, cyber arsenals, and cyber groups, hacking groups are human weapons or digital weapons used by countries in war. And actually, it is now possible to make war with a keyboard by launching any kind of or ransomware attacks or phishing campaigns or spying operations against an enemy. And it is of course, considered as maybe not as much devastating, but very, very devastating to the opponents because it can disrupt a whole economy, a lot of companies. It can undermine the trust that people has in their government. And in case it can create a very unstable climate, which will definitely have devastating repercussions.
Right. That to me is where it gets really interesting because, if if I have to physically go to war, I pick up a weapon, I'm on United States territory, I'm defending the country, or I help across to the United Kingdom or whatever country I'm in the digital world, I can fly whatever flag I want to fly. I've been flying the Ukrainian flag for the last several months and been very successful running around various bits of the world. Now, if something happens in another part of the world, do I go fly that flag? And there's no general looking after me, telling me I can and can't go after a target. Gonna get really, really interesting. And I think this is where I love the idea of threat intelligence, because it helps us understand that landscape a little bit more. It helps companies understand what are those threats, where are they coming from. They're not coming from the traditional areas we thought. They just could be coming because we have an alliance somewhere that doesn't even have anything to do with us, but we're going to get attacked because of it. That to me is a huge, reading some of the report stuff that you have put together, that is really useful because you start going, I have to pay attention because of something I didn't think of beforehand.
Yes, actually, cyber warfare goes beyond the borders and beyond all the orders given by the government of one or another country.
Right.
So there are actually, it's cyber criminal and in cyber criminal community. There are no rules, if not only their own rules. So they can allow themselves to launch a very wide scale cyber attacks and ransomware attacks in particular to any country that they want and to flag affiliation with any government as long as it causes devastating effects on the victims.
As we talk about this, and from an audience perspective, I think it's worth remembering we're not talking about 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 people in the basement or a few people in the building or a few people gathered in the coffee shop. This is tens, hundreds, thousands, tens and hundreds of thousands of individuals that can come together as a group of collectives and effect change. It's an interesting new era, and the Ukraine-Russia conflict has really, really highlighted, much more so. I mean, if we go to your homeland, if we go to the homeland of the conflict between Israel and Palestine, I, for years, have been working on the op Israel, op Palestine stuff, keeping eyes on that stuff. And you take that and you escalate it to the nth degree. And now we see the Ukraine-Russian conflict, and it's going to be interesting to see where we go next with this. I'm intrigued, but also rather concerned at the same time.
Yes, it's indeed very intriguing and worrisome because today anyone can consider himself or herself as part of a hacktivist collective or hacking collective, launch a wide range of attacks for a cause that he or she supports and feel part of a whole group, a whole community with valuable cyber weapons, and good reasons to launch devastating attacks on a country or a company or on a government.
Yeah, I think it's something as we talk more, and Ilya, I mean, as you join us more on this, I want to dig into this a little bit more and almost get to like the philosophy of it, how that can be tracked. Maybe can we get predictive over it? Is there any indicators? Can you see anything that helps us understand what's next? You know, again, if as the CISO for a company, I want to look at what's next. I want to try to understand that. So I really want to dig into this on another, I'd love to dig into this on another recording if you're up for it. It'd be an absolutely fascinating conversation. Cool.
Sure.
Thank you. Danny, anything else you would love to add to this? The floor is yours. Either of you, please feel free to add to this at the moment.
Can I just say that it's awesome to have another cyber girl here?
Yes.
Like we had, I love it. I love it.
Yep.
I think this is really cool. Really smart people coming on and smart girls coming on, rocking it. So
long may that continue.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, big time. Well, this has been an absolute pleasure and an absolute honor. Thank you an absolute ton for this. And again, I'm looking at the reports that are hugely appreciated. And I look forward to kind of going through them more and having you on again. As always, Danny, absolute honor. Thank you very, very much for putting this on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Totally. And we will see everybody on the dark side. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Dr. Dark Web. This show is brought to you by Cybersixgill, the threat intelligence company. If you would like to learn more, please feel free to follow or subscribe to Dr. Dark Web on your favorite podcast streamer. Or, as an alternative, you can always find us online at cybersixgill.com/podcast. You'll find all the latest episodes, goodies, nuggets of information, background, and probably some stickers or two. See you in the dark.